to start our budget presentation for today, and really with the thought of creating the leaders of the next generation. What are we trying to do? I've spoken about this before. We are trying to change the face of education for our children. How are our children learning? How are they growing? How are our teachers being educated so that they could change teaching to meet the needs of kids for this environment? We talk about 21st century skills, right? We want kids to be able to collaborate with each other, problem solve, to communicate, to be creative thinkers. And when we look at that, you have to be a leader. Now, what does being a leader mean? It's not the pretentious statement of you should be the CEO, the President of the United States, you should. That's not what we're espousing when we talk about leadership. Be a leader for yourself in your own world. Understand what your needs are, what your resources are, how to tap those resources, and how to work well with people around you so that you can support what they're thinking and they can support what you're thinking. Learn how, as an adult, to be a critical friend, a really important friend to each other, and that's what leadership is about. So for our next slide, we're going to give you the proposed budget. We are faced always with different fiscal trends and challenges in putting these budgets together. But always we are looking at the district vision and the student outcomes. And the district vision stems from the Board of Education goals. So we really are aligned in our programs with meeting what the Board of Education goals are that are developed in collaboration with me and the other administrators. We look at issues of concern facing Byram Hills and facing public education in general. And then, of course, we can talk at the end about the budget ballot. So this is our budget. 2018-19 was $92,347,680, and our proposed budget for this year, $94,535,535. 2.37% budget to budget increase. It's funny, but the more I know about budgets, and having been without a sitting assistant superintendent for business, I know more than probably I should about how to construct a budget. Percentages don't tell you everything. So 2.37%, why would we have an increase in budget? And what does 2.37% mean? 2.34% is what we have to pay out for contractual obligations. Those are salaries and benefits. So Byram Hills is functioning a budget-to-budget increase of 0.03% for our facilities and our programs. How did we get there? Well, you have this thing called the tax levy cap that's been around it's been plaguing all of us since 2012. The tax levy cap is the permissible tax amount that we are able to ask the public to pay for public education. We look at our declining enrollment, which by the way now is not only steady, but we have a bump in a section of kindergarten for next year, so I'm starting to see this trend that I was anticipating. But we had an enrollment decline over a number of years. Why is that happening? It's demographics. And demographers can tell us that right now our enrollment looks very stable, but as I said, I am seeing our enrollment increase. When we look at our tax levy cap, we're looking at how much can we possibly ask of the taxpayers. With an enrollment decline over the past number of years, we've been looking at how little can we tax the taxpayers to make sure that we maintain the programs that are happening in our schools. So when you're looking at that 0.03%, I want to tell you what comes out of that 0.03%. We have more than a dozen new high school courses since 2015, right? We have, and I'll show you some slides later, 60% of our graduating seniors who are accepted to the top 300 schools in the country, Tier 1 schools. In 2001, I think we were at 12%. So this is what the Byram education and the Byram budget supports. We have, I was discussing this before, we have new programs like the Global Scholars Program at the high school, where very similar to the concept of science research, students are looking at global issues. They're studying global issues generally for a year, spending the second year thinking about something that they're passionate about, and spending the third year trying to make a difference in that endeavor. So right now we have a senior student who is working with an architect on how to help people in Vietnam build their homes with with stronger materials than they currently are building their homes, which is the reason why their homes are flooding out every year in the flooding season. I mean, this is what this is what our kids are doing. To hear that. On a science research level, I was with 7 students and in White Plains, where the legislators were presenting them with certificates for their contributions to science, because we had 7 semifinalists and 1 finalist in the Regeneron Science Research Program, which is outstanding. We were the most highly represented school that was there. So is it about amazing programs? Is it about children's accolades? Somewhat, but I think it's more about voice and choice. And what the 0.03% of the budget is about is giving your children opportunities in whatever area that is. They could be at Coleman Hill, and we could be studying play at an indoor play space. They could be at Coleman Hill doing investigations math for the first time. I love sitting in this room and watching second graders come up and show me how they're processing a math problem. Right? This is fantastic. Second graders talking about their tree projects, right? I'm going to be building a school that's in a tree, and what are my obstacles, and how can I do that? They have presentation skills, they have thought process skills. That starts at this age. This is the foundation that gets them to all of those wonderful things I'm telling you about in high school. So, all of our programs are supported, all of our state and federally mandated programs are supported. I love that all athletic programs remain, extracurricular. Why is that? We're a Byram Hills school community. If you're going to have a community, kids have to be invested in where they go to school. And every time we keep them for an extracurricular activity that they choose to be in, the school becomes their community, and that's important to us. And now, Kelly.
Basically, the budget is broken down into 3 categories, and think of it simply, program is essentially anything that affects students: instructional, transportation, food service. Capital is the maintenance of our buildings, our custodial and maintenance staff, debt service, and administrative is your supervision of students.
Let me stop you there for a second.
Yeah.
Can I?
Of course.
I'm sorry, I can't help myself. But capital, when I look at this, I'm like, okay, there are districts that are not doing that. They are not putting aside monies for capital. And it is why some of our neighbors right now have close to $80 million bonds. They have those bonds out because they have not been able to keep up the infrastructure of their schools. We have been putting money aside to be able to do that, and I can't tell you how important that is. This building, by this spring, will be fully air conditioned. It's necessary to do that.
That's what that is.
That's what that is.
That's just a coincidence. That wasn't set up like that.
Yeah,
We're working on
this
it.
is my prop. Yes, we will be moving to air-conditioned Wampus and the high school within the next year and a half, and Crittenden as the last school. Crittenden being the most air-conditioned currently. That's why that came in last. But when you're looking at our buildings and you're looking at our fields, our hope is that we don't have to replace boilers with a bond or replace roofs with a bond. It doesn't mean that bonds are bad. I don't want to give that misperception. Bonds are sort of like having a mortgage on your home. Like you do have something to write off, your interest, right, necessarily to write off. It's similar to that concept. We have had bonds, and we are still paying bonds from 2005. So when you look to do something like a bond, which we don't know if we ever will have to in the future, that is something that is really paid out over a very long period of time. We have one bond coming off at the end of this year, next year, right, next end of this budget, and we have another bond coming off in 2023,
Yep.
right. And that would be the end of our bonds at that point.
So this is a breakdown in terms of categories. Any school district, the majority of your expenses is your staff. So 75 to 80% in any school district is going to be your salary and benefits of your staff. So similar here in Byram Hills, 75%. Next is your contractual services. That's your, like you mentioned, your maintenance of your buildings, your consultants, people you bring in, OT, PT. That's your contractual service. That's about 14%. Supplies and equipment is only 2.5% of the budget. And then debt service, almost 6%. We have 2 bonds still in play right now. Again, it's going to end after next year. So you'll see that much lower next year. And then maintenance products, as Jen was speaking about. The district keeps it in the budget. We're able to maintain our buildings. As you said, a lot of districts defer maintenance on buildings until they're at the last life of their boiler and we have to replace it. So they do a bond of $50 million because they need a roof, and they need a boiler, they need some paving work. So we're fortunate enough to put that in the budget. We're able to do it on a year-to-year basis, so that cost doesn't add up to the end to a big number. It's done earlier. And then about 0.5% in vehicles. We have our own fleet of buses. We have a replacement of 10 to 15 years on a bus, depending on kind of how it works out. So we're replacing 3 big buses this year, and we have a cycle of replacement of buses. The other side of the revenue, 88% of our revenue comes from the local taxpayer. That's pretty common in this area. 5% for state aid. Again, that's pretty common in Westchester also. We only get 5% for the state for education, whereas other areas obviously get more. Pilots is about 3%. Essentially, everybody know what a pilot is? So a company will be in a school district and they'll come off the tax roll. They'll give the county or the town a set amount for extended period of time. They do this to encourage the company to stay, encourage business in there. Companies come in here and they give a lot of revenue to the town. IBM, they're in your coffee shops, they're paying for your gas, so they are giving some benefit to the school district. So the town and the county will make a deal with them to take them off the tax roll and just get a revenue amount on a yearly basis, usually for an 8 to 10 year period. Sometimes can be smaller. And the IBM is starting a 4-year pilot starting next year. We jump to the pilot. So they signed a new pilot this year. It's about a $70,000 increase for them. Going forward, it does decrease, but next year it's going to be about a 2.4% increase, additional revenue the district's going to get in pilot. Again, the majority of our funds comes from our local tax levy. It's a 1.9% increase from last year. The maximum allowable tax levy, as Jen spoke about, the highest we could go in terms of taxing the taxpayer was 2.31%. So we're down to 1.94. That's about $300,000 difference between what we could have taxed and what we are taxing. And Jen spoke about, I think, earlier before. And I actually have a slide on that. It was about $920,000 the year before. I'll get into that after this slide. Other revenues, about a $25,000 increase. That's essentially our estimate in terms of interest rates for the next year. They are increasing, so we're assuming that we're going to get a little more revenue that way. State aid, a large increase. We're not getting a big chunk from the state. That's not what's happening. Obviously, about 5%. We have a lot of building projects that we're doing, so we're finally getting some aid on those building projects, and we're utilizing some E-rate funds. And E-rate funds come from the federal government. So we buy telecommunication, internet, things of that nature. We get reimbursed from the federal government in order to do that. In terms of tax rate for next year, these are projected tax rates. Obviously, our highest community members are the North Castle town. About a 1.53% increase on your rate. Again, the tax levy is 1.94. How that actually affects you is based on the assessed values within your town. 3 presentations ago, I gave a little presentation of each town and how their assessed values have changed over the last 5 to 10 years. So take a look at that if you have a little more questions there. But in terms of the majority of our taxpayers, you're looking at a 1.53%. Your 2 towns, Newcastle and Bedford, a big difference. You see there's an increase of 4.5 and a decrease in Bedford and a large increase in Mount Pleasant. So you might be wondering, how could it be 1,782? So maybe we're getting too far into this, but essentially it's...
But this is high math and we're following you. Go.
Okay, so essentially, there's only a couple towns in Westchester that haven't fully assessed. So assessment meaning, if you look at your tax bill, you'll see maybe 10,000 assessed value when your home's maybe worth $1 million, let's say. Now, a reassessment of an entire town is extremely expensive. The town of Greenburgh did this 2 years ago. Okay, so what that means is your assessed value and your market value are exactly the same. So your market value is what you can sell it for. If you did a reassessment, it'd give you the exact amount you could sell your home for based on the assumptions they make. The majority of towns in Westchester haven't done a reassessment in about 30 years, probably 40 years, because how expensive it is. So some of these towns, so if you're in Mount Pleasant, I think your equalization rate is about 2.5%. So your assessed value is about 2.5% of your actual value of your home if you could sell it tomorrow.
Okay, stop and pause on
Did that make sense?
So that does make a lot of sense. So your assessed
Typical
value
top.
of home is approximately 2.5% of your.
So every one of these have a different number. I think it's 2.5% for Mount
It's
Pleasant.
not apples to apples.
No, and that's why it's $1,000, whereas opposed Newcastle I think is about 20%. And I can find out the Eagles rate. That's why the rate is so low. You know, this is 2%.
But that's not set by us.
Yeah.
So this is
Right.
like
Tax set by your assessor.
wrong.
Your local assessor does it every year. They reassess slightly. They send that information to the state. The state comes out with what they call an equalization rate, which is compares everybody to 100%. That's why this is 2%, and this will be 12%. I think it is. That
And
makes sense. That's a little.
You should know that Kelly and I, when we first looked at this, we knew what the tax levy cap was. And we said, okay, if we were at 0, how would this affect all 4 of these areas? If we were halfway, if we were at the top, because we need to conceptualize what the effect is going to be. Not that it's going to change what we do with the tax levy cap. I mean, we have to provide for the programs and services that we need in our schools. But we go into it saying, if this were my home, that's what it's influencing and impacting.
And this is a good slide to talk a little bit about. If you look at Bedford, the 15-16 school year, even though the tax rate was, the tax levy was 1.83%, there was a 12% increase in that school year. I mean, there was probably a huge shift in assessed value. If you look going forward, the following year negative, slight increase, and then negative the last 2 years. So again, there's maybe 30, 40 properties that are Byram Hills related. You had some shift there that really caused that issue.
Right. And when you look at the tax levy increases, you'll say, oh my gosh, that was a huge year last year with 3.42%. It actually wasn't. We were allowed to go up to, I think, 4.6%. And last year, we came $920,000 below the permissible amount that we could tax our public, right? So when you look at these percentages, they all have a little story. This is the slide that really excites one of our board members, Ira Shulman. This is the true tax rate. And every year, he waits for this. Like some people wait for the Grammys or the Emmys, and he waits for this. And this is really where you want to be is to the right here, and you're all straining your eyes. So I'm going to tell you that within this group is like Rye City, Harrison, Mamaroneck, Bronxville, Scarsdale, Bedford. We're within all of those. And what this means, Kelly, he explains it better than me. If you pick up your house,
easiest way to think about it. You pick up your house, you throw it down in another district. It's a comparison of that rate, what you'd be paying. So we're at 1512, I think. So 1512, and these other districts going the other way. You have your top, your Carmels, your Austenings, your Lakeland, Peekskill. So that's the comparison of how much you pay in another district, essentially, for the value of your home.
so in other words,
It's a very simplified. It's obviously a little more detailed and needs a little more calculation, but that's essentially the simplified version of it. It's what you
that
pay.
you are getting more for the value of your taxes.
Right.
And how this is figured out, I will admit, as your superintendent, is a mystery to me. It doesn't get figured out by us. It's something that we receive every year. Kelly could do it, but it might take, that's going to be AP calculus for us
and then
in
some,
some
yes.
other meeting, but not here. But, that you're receiving the most value for your home.
Right. And we've been in that area for the last 8-10 years. So definitely a great place to play.
This is my favorite slide. This is what I live for. This is, so sad. But it's so true. This is, if you look at the red, the actual tax levy. Remember, as a school district, this is what we actually could have asked our public to support in taxes, right? And you'll notice last year, we were at 3.42%. And this year, we also fall below the tax levy by close to $300,000. Now, if I look at the inception of the tax levy cap in 2012, from 2012 until now, we are close to $2 million that we have not asked the public for in taxes because we've been very fiscally responsible with this. What does that mean, actually? That $2 million today, if we never stayed below the tax levy limit again, in 5 years is $10 million, right? That is a lot of money over time. And many superintendents would say, or did say to me last year, how can you go below your tax levy limit? You should always stay at your tax levy limit. It's like, no, we should figure out what we need, and we have a responsible public that if we ever had an explosion of children here and needed more staff and needed to go above that tax levy limit, we could explain why. I would rather the money stay in the hands of the taxpayers, let us function with these schools so that you have the confidence in us that we are managing these finances the way we are. Not that you stay at your tax levy limit every year. For what reason? We need what we need, and that's essentially it. So we're really, I'm very proud of that slide. It's my slide. Go ahead, Kelly.
You want to talk about the following? So just quickly.
Oh, yeah, the following.
So in 2021, so two years ahead, not next year, the year after, we're going to actually be at a tax levy of 0 or -%. And that's due to the debt service coming off.
Exactly.
So we won't be paying that $2.5 million out in debt. We can use it towards, our regular increased salary benefits. So.
So you'll see the demographers tell us this. All right, keep in mind, these children haven't been born yet. but they're really good at estimating that. They really are good at it. What I know is what's been happening in our town. And what's been happening in our town is a lot of projects, construction projects that have been going before the town board, looking to take existing places and turn them into different housing. I look at that and I understand two things. First of all, we could see an uptick in population because of that, number one. Number two, there is the potential, and in 2005, when we went for that bond, the district had grown 78% in 15 years. We were at an all-time high at that point. I think we had 1,100 students at the high school to our current 800. Right? So we really have the capacity in this district for approximately 600 students more than we have right now. That doesn't mean we have a budget that could do that at this point, but we have the capacity. So looking at our enrollment for next year, you'll see a lot of up and down. For 18 and 19, 435, 18, 19 in Coman Hill, 456 anticipated. This is the demographer. We have more kids coming than we actually anticipated for kindergarten. And then you'll see that Wampus was at 544 for this year, and it's expected to go to 523. So like a smaller group will be entering Wampus and a larger group will be going to Crittenden. Crittenden we have 532. Next year we're looking at 562. So that will continue. The high school has, as long as that group is now moving through Crittenden, the high school is taking the hit of those smaller classes that were in existence here for a little while. But our point is we still have to maintain these programs. We really want every child to have opportunities afforded our graduating seniors. Not the same experience, but the same types of opportunities for whatever it is you need to get you where you want to go. And I encourage everyone, I can pass some of these around at the end for you to take a peek at, but I encourage you to go to our district website. This is my favorite document other than the tax levy chart. And Dr. Kaltenecker puts this together, and it really talks about not only superior college admissions, which I'll talk about in a slide coming up, but our science research program, district recognitions, our sports. I mean, it really gives the highlights of Byram Hills in here. This is what's a very fascinating slide to me. So you look at 16% of our students in 2001 were accepted to Tier 1 colleges. Those are about the top 300 colleges in the country, out of about 3,400 colleges. Last year, our graduating class, 60% of those students were accepted to Tier 1 college. This is the Byram Hills story over time. Now, this is a conflicting slide to me because I'm also living in a world of wellness, right? And we care that kids are emotionally ready to learn. We care that we are not taking kids on an educational journey that mimics the New York City Marathon. Like by the end you got there, but you're completely depleted, right? We don't want that. So we are having lots of conversations about our schedules and about our programs and how we're making sure that we're not making kids very anxious, that we are not contributing to that, which we know is something that exists in our society. So while 60% is great, I caution not every child should necessarily be in that school if they're accepted. That's not why I'm showing this, to say that every kid should go to a school like that. I'm showing this to say that colleges are looking at Byram Hills and they are saying those children are ready. And that's what the Byram Hills education is affording them. It's not your ticket to the Ivy Leagues. It's not about that at all. It's about There's a value in the education that's here. Colleges look at students from years past who've been accepted to their schools from Byram Hills, and they say, how do they perform? And that very much influences who they're taking next time. And they are saying, your children are coming to us ready. Tier 2 colleges is another 18%, so you're talking about 78% of our children getting accepted to Tier 1 or Tier 2 colleges. Look at the kids who we say are in the middle, right? That's where they are, and that's pretty amazing. So our grand finale, our board adopted our budget on April 23rd. And on May 7th, which is Tuesday, we will, at our board meeting, have Budget Hearing 5, which is a preview of the entire budget. And then we are asking people to come out to vote and be informed voters on May 21st at Crittenden. And if you can, spread the word about what the budget includes and have informed friends come with you as an informed voter, we greatly appreciate that. So once again, 1.94%. Remember, that's about $300,000 below the permissible tax limit. And our budget-to-budget increase, 2.37. But remember, it's only a 0.03% of that we are utilizing to continue our programs and running our facilities. And our total proposed budget.
He loves school.
So for any parents who have not come to Wampus yet, I understand, and I also know very well sometimes the anxiety and the nervousness that you feel as parents leaving Coleman Hill. It's probably the most special K-2 building ever. But really part of our job at Wampus is really to start fostering a lot more independence. They're working on it here at Coleman Hill and in setting the stage to begin their independence. You see it in first grade, second grade, and sometimes kindergarten. We just kind of have to carry it that much further so that by the time they go to sixth grade, you see them walking into town. You need to make sure that your child is confident enough to look left and look right when they cross the street. We have to start cutting the ties and giving them that independence. So that's a big part of our plan at Wampus, is making children really independent. There's a lot of similarities between Coleman Hill and Wampus. And then there's a lot of similarities between Wampus and Crittenden. Some of the similarities that are there are the security measures. The doors are locked, so you can expect when you arrive there, you're not going to be able to get in until you have, your proper identification. Our security officer, his name is Joe, and we have the SROs, the student resource officers, Officer Anthony and Officer Donnie. They actually go back and forth every other week. They'll be at Wampus and Crittenden, or they'll be at Coleman Hill and the high school. But there's always one in both of those campuses every week. Every day. The drills your children have told you about here are the same drills that live at Wampus, because we have to. We're mandated by the state to practice drills, and we should. I want to really go through the fast lane. So in the afternoon at Wampus, very similar to HCC and a little different than Coleman Hill, you don't ever get out of your car when you pick your children up at dismissal. You just really pull up, and the children will come out to you. So we have a system to really keep parents out of the building at the end of the day. For anyone doing the fast lane, the kids will exit the building and come to you. We're not walking them to you. We have aides and myself kind of staggered in the loop, and the children will walk to you, and that's part of fostering that independence. 8:25 is the arrival, but you can arrive at 8 o'clock, but it's earlier than Coleman Hill. We have a longer day at Wampus for children. We have a little more flexibility built into the day, and I'll take you through that, and I'll give you the why. And so we continue what's happened here. So here, I feel like it just happened so organically. The social, emotional wellness of children, it's just effusive in this whole building when you walk through it. The district as a whole is taking on a social, emotional curriculum, and that really began with our positive behavior intervention curriculum. So we continue that, and we really carry that all the way up through the 12th grade. And then you have just just looking at the K2 and the 3-5, they're all elementary, but we're moving from dependent. That does not mean K2 children are dependent. It means that overall they're more dependent, and we're transitioning into overall more independence. But honestly, I could take 3-5, put it with K2, and put 6-8 there. It's just that progression. We're learning about ourselves and our family and our community in K2. And then we're starting to see ourselves as we relate to others in our community and our families and our classrooms. You'll hear children, their interests that are being nurtured here in Coleman Hill really start to be, they're going deep. They know their interests, they know their likes, they know their dislikes. We have adults really responsible for the decision-making of our children. And then you'll start to see by 5th grade, children are really in charge of making their own decisions. I mean, bedtime, sports they play, activities they do. Adults, again, responsible for their safety. The expectation for our students up in 4th, 5th grade is that you better make sure you know how to keep yourself safe on the internet. That is the expectation. So that when you get your phone and you're in middle school, you know how to be safe, responsible, and respectful. Those were the words that we used back in kindergarten with them. We're learning about emotions, K2. We're developing emotional regulation. How do I deal with my frustrations? How do I deal with my impulses? All of those things. Again, we follow a core academic curriculum. It's pretty much in line with what's happening here at Coleman Hill. Important for you to know, I don't know the math investigations program that began here for your children. Most of your children who were in kindergarten or 1st grade this year or last year started with investigations. So it's not new to them, it's what they do. Children in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade are in year 1 of investigations. Next year, 5th grade will be in year 1 of investigations. We're doing a very slow rollout. Math Investigations is an inquiry-based math program that helps our kids really learn math through different entry points, through games, through tasks, and it really helps them see how to solve problems really concretely, pictorially, to more abstract. And procedure is in there and linear thinking is in there too, but it's this range of learning about math. It sets them up nicely for the 6-12 experience, which is really more about going deep into learning math topics. So that's really our focus right now, is this new math program. Technology. So technology, we're really trying to get them ready for independence in the middle school. They're going to take those phones, and if you have a middle schooler, they're going to be using them a lot independently, and you're going to hope that they have the skills they need to be safe. So our technology curriculum, we have a digital skills curriculum that addresses what I was just talking about. We also have one-to-one Chromebooks. Here we have 2-to-1. At Wampus we have 1-to-1, and that's deliberately done. So we have a lot of technology. So over there on the right, the Narevo span. That's a big wall. You have one here too.
Oh, okay.
It's a big wall. It looks like a big wall. And it's actually a Narevo span, and multiple children, up to 10 at a time, can be working on it. So instead of the smart boards or the Promethean boards where it's not as many children at a time, over there you have 6 children working on some word work in the 3rd grade. So the Wampus Master schedules, the day is longer. You're going to come to Wampus for an extra 45 minutes a day. In that time, you have an extra period called Encore. When you get to the middle school, you're going to hear about Encore too. Encore at Wampus is a time for children to receive a couple things. They can receive AIS supports for reading or math, and they can receive instrument lessons. In 4th and 5th grade, our children take an instrument. That happens during Encore. The reason that was created 20 years ago was because the thinking was there was 30 months at Wampus to get any child ready for 6th grade in terms of ELA and math content. That was a long time ago when we had only one state test in 4th grade and we had one state test in 8th grade. We didn't want children to be receiving any kind of academic intervention services all throughout the school day, so they created Encore. At the same time, our 4th graders and our 5th graders were getting an instrument. So we wanted to make sure that we had a safe place for them to receive these services if they needed them and to get their instrument lessons if they needed them. Now you're probably saying, well, what about my child if they don't fall under those two? And they wouldn't go to any of those. We have a whole Encore program built, 20-day cycles that are these fun, engaging activities related to a discipline. So you will go into the hub, and you will do some problem-based learning activity in technology. You will go into the art room, and you might do some kind of build some clay things in the art room. You might go to the gym, and you might engage in 20 days of an intramural activity. So you go through these 8 different Encore cycles. If you're a child who's taking an instrument, you're going to take that instrument one time a week during encore. The other 4 days, you're going into your encore cycle. So it allows them a little flexibility. They have this 20-day cycle that they're part of, and all children 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade experience encore. Some children, though, will never go to encore because they're getting their instrument, they're getting their AIS support, which is we call it academic intervention support. And that's what it was designed for, to help them close the gap so that by the time they reach 6th grade and the content just gets so much heavier in the latter half of their schooling, they're ready for it. That's what it was designed for. And then just lastly, we have these meetings once a month with all the children. They come into our gym, and Mr. Mack and myself, we lead these community meetings, trying to get them to see the community that they belong to, their grade level community and the school-wide community. And so if you're a 3rd grader, you're going to come into the cafeteria once a month with us, and we're going to talk to you just about things that are happening on the playground, in the lunchroom, with friends, just more to get to know them on an individual basis. Mr. Mack is the assistant principal at Wampus.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.